From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. The United States Congress will not support military intervention in Venezuela, according to the House of Representatives Foreign Affairs Chairman. Representative Eliot Engel made this statement during a hearing on the political situation in Venezuela. Speculation over possible U.S. military intervention began after President Donald Trump said it was an option.
But I do worry about the president's saber-rattling, his hints that the U.S. military intervention remains an option. I want to make clear to our witnesses and to everyone else watching, U.S. military intervention is not an option. Congress decides when, where, and how the U.S. military is used around the world, and Congress would not support military intervention in Venezuela.
Eliot Abrams, the U.S. Special Envoy to Venezuela, has asked other countries to assist the United States intervention efforts in Venezuela. Abrams is a former diplomat who advocates U.S. intervention around the world. He is particularly infamous for his role in the Iran-Contra affair and supporting genocide in Central America. He has also been linked to the failed 2002 coup against Comandante Hugo Chavez.
And as we meet today, Mr. Chairman, the State Department and its interagency partners are hard at work, responding to Interim President Guaido's call for international humanitarian assistance. We invite international partners to join us in helping to fill warehouses and assistance centers.
Activists from the Code Pink social justice movement interrupted Abrams while he was speaking in the House. They say that the special envoy to Venezuela is a war criminal. The activists pointed to Abrams' long history of interventionism and the tragic consequences of his actions.
Join Code Pink and answer calls.
Meanwhile, President Donald Trump welcomed his Colombian counterpart, Iván Duque, to the White House. Duque's right-wing administration has been loyal to the U.S. since he took power in April 2018. When speaking to the press, Trump contradicted the House of Representatives for Foreign Affairs' earlier statements, reiterating the threat of direct military intervention in Venezuela. Meanwhile, President Duque confirmed his government's plans to support the U.S. position. But back in Colombia, a number of political sectors and social organizations are demanding that President Duque refrain from involvement in any type of military intervention in Venezuela. In a 16-page letter addressed to Duque, they outlined the ways in which the government of Colombia has acted in a manner which has serious implications. Signatories, including lawmakers, academics, and well-known personalities, also reject the use of Colombian territory by the U.S. military for war operations in other Latin American neighbors. During an interview with the Al Mayadin TV, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro said the opposition lawmaker Juan Guaidó, who declared himself the inter-president of Venezuela last month, will have to answer before the courts for his actions.
This person, who believes that politics is a game and that he can violate the Constitution and the law, sooner or later will have to answer before the courts, before the law. I'm absolutely sure of this.
President Maduro also called on Arab countries to defend Venezuela and accused the United States of inventing a crisis to justify intervention.
I ask for the support of all countries across the world, of the Arab world, the Muslim people. I'm asking for their support. Defending Venezuela is worth it. They can't fabricate that Maduro has weapons of mass destruction, as they did in Iraq. They can't fabricate that there are massacres here, like they did in Libya. So they fabricated a crisis which, with an alleged noble goal, they want to carry out a humanitarian intervention.
During a visit to Bolivia, the former head of the UNASUR bloc, Ernesto Samper, rejected the U.S. government's intervention in Venezuela. He says the opposition has made the wrong decision by supporting violence.
There are two clear paths to overcome this crisis. One is by strength, by war, by confrontation, which is led by the government of the United States, with the regrettable consent of a group of Latin American countries in the Lima Group. And on the other side, there is a consensus that seems to be broad around a negotiation to find a solution, like the Pope says, just and peaceful for the situation in Venezuela.
Thousands of Nicaraguans have signed a petition of solidarity with the Venezuelan government at the National Palace of Culture. People showed their support for Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro and his government. They also strongly reject the intervention of the United States and its allies in Venezuelan affairs. Venezuela's ambassador to Nicaragua, Javier Arrué, said that the Trump administration is only after his country's natural resources and oil reserves. He also said that the U.S. blockade has taken away more than $35 billion from Venezuela.
Today, we Nicaraguans show our solidarity, our firm convictions that we will overcome these threats together with Venezuela. The same way we survived an indirect intervention of the United States in the 80s. You see, we have already felt a similar threat on our own flesh, and that's why today, and always, we will show our solidarity with the Venezuelan people.
China's government has said that reports that diplomats held talks with Venezuela's opposition are false. This comes after the Wall Street Journal claimed the diplomats were concerned about oil projects in Venezuela.
In fact, the report is false. It's fake news. Recently, some media have been concocting some false information, and we don't know what their agenda is. We hope the relevant media can do news reporting based on objective and fair principles. In terms of recent Venezuela issue, we maintain that it should be resolved by a dialogue to seek a political solution.
During an interview with the Real News Network, actor and activist Danny Glover criticized the U.S. over its actions against Venezuela. Glover singled out so-called humanitarian aid.
Now what you've done is you've taken the billions of dollars that rightfully belong to the Venezuelan people, and what you've done is you've taken those billions of dollars, you place sanctions on it. They can't use their own money, their own resources, and then you come with as like this. This armor, this knight in shining armor to save them and everything, with a few $1 million of quote-unquote humanitarian aid, which we don't know where that money goes to.
South Africa's union federation, COSATU, has mobilized workers to march against high unemployment and an economy, which they say disadvantages workers and those who are yet to enter the job market. Our correspondent Matuba Maktije was at the march in Johannesburg.
Workers affiliated to trade union COSATU heeded the call to action against joblessness and ill treatment of workers by corporates. COSATU affiliates range from retail, textile, and public servants, among others.
We have to destroy the system of capitalism, which is a system of wage labor. That is the foundation of exploitation of workers. They must come to a system of socialism, the system that guarantees the well-being of everybody, the system that guarantees work, that respects labor.
We are sick and tired problems about policies that are not benefiting the working class and the poor.
The march finally got to a start after several hours of waiting. This is certainly not the biggest turnout COSATU has ever managed in its history, but this is certainly a message to send to the government to say more jobs.
The Federation is a shadow of its former self, and irreconcilable differences among members caused the disintegration. However, the organization mobilized enough support to bring Johannesburg CBD to a standstill. This was a nationwide strike, and all of the country's 9 provinces were painted red by COSATU affiliates. But here in Johannesburg, a list of concerns to both government and the private sector were highlighted in a demonstration outside the provincial legislature and a chamber of mines. And there was a punting of a more socialist approach in the place of what's seen as the greedy capitalist system.
The mining sector announcing packages of retrenchments across various sectors of the mines. They've been saying the prices of minerals have been going down. I can tell you that since December, the price of gold and other minerals have been going up. They've been going up and up even today.
Despite COSATU's unhappiness with the ANC's government's handling of state-owned enterprises and no immediate solutions to unemployment, the Federation says it will urge workers to vote for the ANC in the coming elections. Matuba Mahlachi, Telesur, Johannesburg.
Week-long anti-government protests in Haiti have intensified, leaving 6 people dead. Tensions escalated after a major prison break on Tuesday. Local reports say dozens of detainees escaped during a demonstration in front of the police station next to the prison. Shops have been looted and cars burned. Police have since set up a barricade to prevent protesters from gaining access to the presidential offices. The Caribbean community CARICOM is expressing deep concern about the situation in Haiti. CARICOM is calling for calm and an end to ongoing violence, appealing for all involved to engage in dialogue and respect the Constitution. The regional blog said this will allow the situation to be resolved peacefully. We'll be back in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. The radical Islamic group Boko Haram has forced thousands of people to leave their homes in the northeast of Nigeria. Many have crossed the border into Cameroon to seek asylum. Boko Haram's jihadist insurgency began in 2009 and has cost 27,000 lives and forced more than 2 million others to flee. An entire generation of Yemeni children could be lost due to the continued malnutrition. That warning comes from the United Nations World Food Program. Yemen's nearly 4-year war has killed 10,000s of people, and Saudi Arabia's blockade has brought millions more to the brink of famine. The UN is pushing for a ceasefire and troop withdrawal.
First of all, I think we will have needless loss of lives for these children that would have been acutely malnourished, and in the long term you would expect that the productivity of those children would really be affected because they would have grown without a proper nutrition base within their body. So in terms of being able to resist diseases and being productive, it's going to be very challenging. So it is key that we protect and save these children.
Because of the war, there isn't any transportation, there isn't any medical care, malnutrition throughout. It's like a famine. Kids all around the country are suffering.
A boot company in Zimbabwe has defied odds by operating fully. This while the country reels from the West sanctions. The country boot company is located in the once industrial hub of Bulawayo. It's increasing production to keep up with increasing international demand for its products. That's even though sanctions imposed on Zimbabwe by Britain and US have resulted in an economic meltdown.
Employment, 99.9% unemployment. You see how difficult it is. It's lucky if you have a job, because most of the people don't have jobs. So when you find yourself employed, you know you are that one out of 100 who is lucky.
Now to Ecuador, social movements have begun a day of action with workers going on strike. We are now going live with Denise Herrera, our correspondent in Quito, who can tell us more. Hello, Denise. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, Jose Daniel. We are at the Simón Bolívar Plaza in close to the center of Quito, where several organizations of workers are gathering today against the latest economic measure imposed by President Lenin Moreno. As you can see behind me, the workers are here with banners. They are joining in this protest against these economic measures. They announced and said that they are against the increase in the price of the gasoline and the and they are against, also they are struggling and maintain their struggle to eliminate all neoliberal economic policies that affect Ecuador. As you can see, all these workers are here fighting to defend and to protect their rights. We should remember also that the government announced just recent talks with the IMF, so they are also against these talks. They are very worried about the current situation of Ecuador, so they will march through the main streets of the center of Quito. They are asking to defend their rights, as they are asking President Lenin Moreno they are trying to talk with President Lenin Moreno.
Thank you, Denise, for sharing this information with us today. Now to Colombia, where on Thursday the FARC will report to the Special Jurisdiction for Peace about a number of kidnappings. At a private hearing, the 31 former members of the FARC Secretariat will discuss its participation in the kidnappings of Colombians and foreigners between 1993 and 2012. The judge said the testimonies will be compared with reports delivered from Public Prosecutor's Office, social organizations, and victims before a final ruling is made. In Mexico, the state attorney of Colima says 69 bodies have been found in 49 clandestine graves in Tecomán. 2 searches have been carried out as part of the national search program for the disappeared. In the first one, between Tecomán and Armería, 19 bodies were located in 11 graves. 10 in another area. Authorities found 50 corpses in 38 graves. There are 28,000 identified bodies and more than 1,000 clandestine graves still haven't been searched. Thousands of people have taken to the streets to protest against the economic policies of President Mauricio Macri. Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Edgardo Esteban, has more.
Social movements are demonstrating under the slogan Land, Housing and Work in downtown Buenos Aires, near the obelisk. They are demanding real solutions. On one hand, they are asking that Mauricio Macri's government keep agreements that protect vulnerable sectors. They are also asking for an increase in salaries and security guarantees for their work. On the other hand, they demand Congress approve 4 laws that would give social help, including a food emergency law that would provide funding for soup kitchens in vulnerable neighborhoods. Worker unions have said that more demonstrations will be held next week, and they are also calling for a national strike, as part of ongoing rejection of Mauricio Macri and the presence of IMF representatives who are controlling severe economic adjustments.
We thank Edgardo for that report. Now to Spain, the parliament has rejected the government's budget, a move that would likely lead Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez to call for snap elections. Our correspondent Adriana Cardoso has more from Madrid.
In Spain, the parliament has failed to approve the government's budget for 2019. It did not have the support of parties like the PP, the Citizens Party, nor the parties in favor of Catalan independence. This was a predictable outcome since last week, when the relationship between the Spanish government and the Catalan independence parties ruptured, and the Spanish government needed the support of the independence movement to be able to pass this budget. After the vote, some leaders of the opposition, such as PP's Pablo Casado, demanded that Pedro Sánchez call elections as soon as possible. Within the Socialist Party, the Minister of Development, José Luis Abalos, said that news about elections could come shortly. Right now, there are 3 possible scenarios, though. The strongest is that there could be an election on the 14th or the 18th of April, which would have its advantages and disadvantages for PSOE. On the one hand, it would allow them to take advantage of the discourse generated by this vote that the right wing and the Catalan independence parties won't allow them to govern. But on the other hand, it's a very early date indeed, and they'd have to dissolve Parliament shortly to abide by the 54-day law to call elections. Once Parliament is dissolved, if they were to call elections for the 14th, they'd have to dissolve Parliament next Tuesday, February 29th. Another option is to call elections for Super Sunday, that is the 26th of May, so they would coincide with autonomous community elections, as well as the municipal and European elections. That date has not convinced some members of the PSOE party, who feel that it could work against them. That is the date, however, that the right wing are demanding, such as leader of the PP, Pablo Casado. Finally, the third option opened by the failure of the budget to pass is one of resistance, the path that Pedro Sanchez has taken throughout the past year, which would be to continue governing without his own budget, but with a renewal of the budget inherited from the government of Mariano Rajoy, and maybe allow him to put off elections until next October.
We thank Adriana for that report. It's time for a second break. More news coming up. Welcome back. The International Court of Justice has ruled that Iran's efforts to recover $2 billion of assets frozen by the U.S. can proceed. Tehran says the U.S. has illegally taken Iranian financial assets based in the Netherlands. The ICJ is the United Nations top court, but it has no power to enforce its decisions. The case comes at a tense moment between the two countries as the Trump administration unravels bipartisan agreements. The European Commission has added Panama, Puerto Rico, Saudi Arabia, and others to a blacklist of nations that pose a higher risk of terrorism financing and money laundering. The list, with a total of 23 jurisdictions, will be submitted to the EU Parliament for approval. Several EU states criticize the move because their economic relations with the countries will likely to be damaged.
With weak rules against money laundering.
Following violent clashes which claimed 2 lives, the Senegalese President Macky Sall has called on young people to campaign peacefully ahead of presidential elections in the country. Speaking at a rally at Kaolack, Sall urged supporters of all parties not to fight each other. Dozens have been arrested due to the violence that erupted on Monday. Elections are planned for February 24th.
I told the youth in my camp that no one is taking part in acts of violence, and I ask young people who are not from our camp not to be violent because we are a family.
At least 5 people have been killed in a plane crash in Kenya's Great Rift Valley. 2 U.S. and French citizens were among the victims. The plane was trying to perform an emergency landing when it clipped trees and crashed in a field. For our last story, Telesur released a song as part of an international campaign called Tambores de la Paz para Venezuela. It was performed by Cuban singer Raúl Torres and features talented musicians from the region. The video is a message against war in Venezuela and the rest of the world.
El vuelo de vivir sin armas, como descubrir el paraíso celestial, aquí en la tierra sin morir, aprendamos a convivir con quien no nos entienda igual para tener un porvenir donde podamos respirar. Basta ya. Suenen los ángeles de la tierra, los tambores de la paz. Quemen los tambores de la guerra para que no suenen más, para que no suenen. Suenen los tambores en mi tierra, los tambores de la paz.
And we come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And don't forget to follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.